Hey, everybody. We were just wanting to give everybody a good recap of what we saw this week with Farm Progress and some of the product updates that came out from Precision, PTX, and from the rest of the industry. Stick around to find out more. Hey, everybody. It's Travis Kelley and Bryan Tucker again here for the Ag Technologies Podcast. Today, we're mainly talking about Farm Progress and some of the product updates that we've seen come out this week. We were going to try to get started talking through some things that came out from Precision and PTX, and then some other products that were coming out with the rest of the industry. So I guess I'll let you go first. What was something you saw, Tucker, that was probably your biggest release this week? And it doesn't have to be from Precision or whatever, but obviously if it is, that's great. But
that's a tough one. When I think about it, obviously, Travis, you know that I'm a small potato farmer here as well on the side, and I was kind of thinking about it from my farm's perspective, and I don't know. I mean, one of the things like from Precision specifically or PTX that they had coming out was like the dry set micro that's going to go in with the that connects to the insecticide hoppers. And kind of going back to last episode, we talked about the micro gel that they were putting out in furrow. This is what they were actually using to put that out at the PTI farm. But just with the micro set, I know, and for a lot of our customers and a lot of the people listening to this, it's probably going to be more focused towards insecticide and being able to put out insecticide on a row by row basis on your planter. But even looking at it from my perspective on our farm, I was looking at it more from a dry fertilizer standpoint, kind of going in the row as we're going through in bed, and even because I know it had like a range from putting out like 1.5 pounds to the acre up to I think it was 80 pounds to the acre, depending on what speed you're going and what kind of product you're putting out. But I guess maybe a little bit selfishly, that's one that probably caught my attention a lot. What about you? What kind of stuck out to you?
Well, I like that a lot, and I guess go ahead and talk about the dry set. And y'all can find links on this. The dry set micro, like he was saying, is not fully taking the place that we know of yet, but we already have V-Drive insecticide, which works really well. Attaches to the standard hopper box. We retrofit those all the time. It's a very straightforward piece of equipment, and we've been really, really pleased with it. But the dry set micro is kind of a fancier sounding name, I guess, than V-Drive insecticide. But it does the same thing, but they kind of took all the pieces of the insecticide, which is honestly a very simple just meter replacement of the factory meter with an electric motor is really all it is. It's a paddle wheel style unit, and the dry set micros go into a more auger style, which I would imagine is what's going to give you a greater range of rate. Like you were saying, I think you can go lower end, higher end, a little cleaner, and probably achieve those rates better than what the standard paddle wheel could do. I would be very interested. My biggest thing, and you and I both know our biggest thing that we run into is people leave product in them and they get stuck. And that paddle wheel is notorious for just getting a little bound up. Obviously, you can normally grab the handle and turn it and get it out of the way, but as much as we would like to say it doesn't happen, how often do we run into going to do a preseason on a planter and you can smell it when you're walking up and it's still there?
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
So that does happen, and sometimes it can turn to cement with all of our humidity that we have here. So the dry set micro looks to be a really great upgrade of what the V-Drive insecticide, which is already a really great product, has. I know there's a few features I haven't really touched one other than that beta unit we have, but it looks like they've added the door to it to where if you're servicing the meter, you can close the door, which keeps the product from falling out. Obviously, there's some safety things there that's helpful. And then trying to remember, was there another kind of a clean out door or something on the back, or am I thinking wrong on that?
I think it just had the close off that you're talking about, so that you can
Okay.
close it off and while you're working on it.
Right. But that's a really cool add-on. And then they also released, and I don't know if I see that on our list here, but they also released the new blockage monitors, which is huge. That's going to be something that's going to integrate directly into a precision system that we're already using some Dickie John sensors that work really well for this, but these are giving you more ranges on the standard insecticide tube size, and it will plug right into the precision system. So that's something that we're very excited about, that we've been waiting on, because you can add that whether you're doing control or not. So if you got a guy that's even just doing a monitor only system, he could have I guess he could have a smart connector, but have an SRM base on there and
Yeah.
still run a insecticide blockage monitor also. I mean, that would be a great add-on even on a monitor only system. So insecticide blockage monitoring, that'll be a great addition also. I really liked the DuraWear depth upgrade. That was I guess they call it DuraWear Depth Handle. That's a really cool feature, I think, in taking the old notches. Because how many settings do you on a deer row unit? What's the normal number of settings on that? I'm trying to remember how many notches that is, and I know you can alternate too, but how many total notches you get?
Like you probably got about 10 on each side or so.
I think that's right. And obviously they're all set at
That's
touch,
right.
and you can stair step them. But then, do you remember how many ranges it gives you on that? So, because what this thing is, and if we add some pictures on this, it's really just adding another little piece on top of those notches that gives you ranges inside of the notches. So if you're on level 1, now you've got notches inside of level 1. If you're on level 2, you got notches inside of level 2. So if you're starting your season out, and you still got to do it the way you normally would, start your season out, go out there, and whether you got a setting seed or you got a 2x4 or whatever you're using, go out there and set your depths on the shop floor, and you can now fine tune it even tighter. So that's a really cool add-on. I don't, every time Precision comes out with something like this, I look at it and I'm like, I mean, I could have thought of that.
That just makes sense.
This is a really cool, like, it's an age old issue, and that's something I'll say for Precision's sake, that you see a lot of folks develop past what the industry needs and don't come back to it. But if you look at Precision released Smart Depth, which completely replaces the T handle and makes it all electronic and gives you a very wide range of depth settings. They could just say, we're gonna ram that down your throat, and you're not gonna do anything but Smart Depth if you want to do any add-ons. But instead, they came out with this feature for the DuraWear that's more of a mechanical upgrade, but actually gives you a really, really good upgrade as far as just overall use of that row unit and how you can set your depths and how you can plan for the season and get everything set up ahead of time. So I'll give them a pat on the back on that one, just for being able to see, okay, well, the market likes Smart Depth, but that may not be for everybody. And we still got guys that are having this issue, and they can run it mechanically, and which is good for us too, because we have so much success with Delta Force and getting your depth right on the back, and then using the Delta Force to kind of handle the rest. But you still got to set your depth right, regardless. You still got to set your depth right, and the Delta Force can sometimes maybe cover up for some things that you don't have set right, but you still got to set your depth right. So that's a great place to start, and I think it does bring some insight to remind the grower or remind us, like, this is important. You do need to go back there and set these, and there might be a finer tuned number that you could set it to. So I think that add-on will be great for us to have in our back pocket, but also for the grower to implement themselves.
Well, that, you would ask me which one my favorite was. I was kind of between the micro set, or the dry set micro, and this product as well, because like you said, we have the automatic depth adjustment, which gives us that opportunity to adjust within 1/100th of an inch. Right, we can make very specific adjustments on depth. The standard T handle, you got 1/4 of an inch. You're either at 1/4, you're at 1/2. There's no in between. This just gives us that opportunity. If we have moisture at a very particular level, it just gives you that option to adjust it within that 1/4 inch range. And something else that Precision was talking about is, I mean, you can attest to this. When we go to a planter, I mean, I don't know if I've ever been to a planter that if they've checked every single row for true depth, like you're talking about, very rarely is every T handle in the same notch. Is it rarely every one of them across the board in a 3/4 notch or whatever. So
they are in the same notch. They haven't been checked.
They hadn't been checked. That's exactly right. But what this might allow us to do is, if we want to have a standard set, say we want it in a 3/4 position across the board, if that's going to get us, if we're going for, whatever it is, 2-inch depth, when we kind of find that window that we can be in, we can actually get every T handle to be in that same position and then adjust it within that range. And then that will allow us to go through and make sure that nothing's changed throughout the season. And you can kind of quickly visually look at that, the planter, and see if every T handle's in that same position. We know that we're holding consistent depth across the planter. So it's just another, like you said, Precision just puts out products that make sense, so.
Well, and you think about that too, if you put them all, just say you start out all on the same notch and one is just way out of whack, then you're going to know, like, I probably need to take a look at my mustache, or
let me look at that mustache, or the gauge,
or my gauge wheel arms. You get down there and the gauge wheel arms are notched out like, super deep or something. Like, something's not going to be right if you got one row that's just way out of whack. And it's probably going to just be a mechanical thing, or it could be hung up on something, whatever. But more than likely, it's probably just more, something more in that mechanism or the mustache or something like that. Or like the ones we've seen before where the mustache wasn't, assembled from the factory correctly. We have seen that before.
We have seen
it. And that stuff happens. And it may not have gotten caught, for even a year or so. It might not have gotten caught. Just things that might help us, check back on ourselves also. Okay, so moving down through a little more. So as far as the Precision stuff goes, we've got the, Symphony Vision that we've talked about a good bit more. And those, with the Symphony Vision, we've talked about that a little bit around, and that's pairing with our Symphony PWM nozzle control. Obviously, you got to have that on the sprayer first. That's the basis of it. Have the every tip control. But then the Vision's adding the cameras, and I think the bigger release on that, because that's been out, but the bigger release on that is them supporting more crops, getting more data into the systems to where we can take it to more growers, because we do have it on more available crops and having that data in there, because that's really is that Symphony Vision is essentially AI for spraying, which I know there's a lot of companies out there that are doing some of that stuff with facial recognition and all those different, obviously they've been using the near infrared and things like that for a long time, but that's where, a lot of them are going, is the actual facial recognition and that kind of stuff, because it's going to be really hard to ever get past green on green and those kind of options unless you can actually use some higher AI type features to get there. So yeah, the Symphony Vision was another big one there. The DuraWear, Panorama, the Precision software, this linking all these displays together and everything, which is gonna ultimately help with the Symphony Vision, because that data is pushing and pulling and all that, and you're able to use that with scouting, which is possibly an underrated discussion on what all you could be using the Symphony Vision for, having the Panorama linked with that. And then talking about that, they've released the Starlink option also, which shows that there's going to be a high level of traffic, I would say. But also, there's going to be a lot of areas where this is all rural for the most part. So there's going to be a lot of areas where there may not be good standard 4G, 5G connectivity. So they're now having the Starlink out there. And we have some customers that already have Starlinks on their tractors too. So it's not an uncommon thing. But that is another feature that is out there now, and they got a bunch of different packages on how you can get into that, adding a Starlink to a tractor. The FarmEngage is that. This is kind of moving over to the PTX stuff. The FarmEngage is what has been called Trimble software. So Trimble software is our data suite that we use on the Trimble side for auto syncing between tractors, fleet management, material management, work orders, all those different things that you can do from the web down to the field and vice versa. They've rebranded that FarmEngage with all the new PTX stuff. So that's something that might look a little different to people, but it's the same software. But some of the cool things that they've added in now is with all the AGCO relationships, this is adding in some of the softwares that we were using individually and bringing them all into one suite. So there was that next farming suite that AGCO a lot of times had to use to convert data from, like if we were taking data from a Fendt tractor to a Trimble or vice versa, or a Fendt to a Deere or something, we would have to use some of that software to convert. And then there is the Fendt kind of like the Fendt Operations Center of sorts too. That's integrated into some of that too. So it's really taking some more of the APIs and everything, especially the ones that are in-house to AGCO, and connecting all those together. So that FarmEngage is going to be a stronger suite of tools to allow all the, whether it's precision planting, PTX, Trimble, AGCO, all that family of machines and equipment to talk to each other. I hadn't really heard for sure how the Panorama is going to tie in yet, but I'm hoping some of that comes, because we do want to be able to get that planter data into our FarmEngage suite. So what else on the precision side or the PTX side other than OutRun, which we'll talk about in a second? Is there anything else on that I'm overlooking?
I think you kind of touched on most of it. The one couple things that I'll add specifically probably to Panorama. So with Panorama, the couple things that I'm probably pretty excited about is, especially if we have some growers out there that are planting with their precision planter, and then we can take them to their sprayer now with Symphony, and then we can go to the help me out, Travis. Yield Sense. I couldn't get it out.
Right.
And then we can take them to Yield Sense on their combine. But I think it's just really exciting. I've played around in Panorama some, and when we can actually compare our planting data to our yield data. So they have like really easy tools where you can say, I want to go look at my Delta Force settings compared to my yield data. I can see what difference specifically looked like narrowing down to my downforce. How did that affect my yield? Or my FurroForce, my closing system, how did that affect my yield? My seeding rates. You can drill down very specifically and look at your planting data compared to your yield data. And I think that's probably a very useful tool, and kind of, we have a lot of data available to us, making that data, usable and where we can actually make operating decisions off of it. I think that's, it's very a good tool for growers. And then the other thing that we've talked about a lot with Panorama is kind of the diagnostic tools that are going to hopefully be available through it. Just for us, the growers can give us access to look into their 2020s essentially, And so if there's a problem going on, they're in the field, they have something they can't figure out, they can give us access to that, to Panorama, which will allow us to see real-time diagnostics. It's keeping up in the field with any notification that comes up on that 2020 goes to Panorama. We can go through and click and kind of figure out whether it's us figuring out before we go out to the farm what kind of already diagnosing what the problem is, or if it's something where we can just tell the grower, hey, change this setting and you're good to go. But just the diagnostic capabilities of it as well, I think is pretty exciting.
And support can get into that data just as easy as we can too, right? Like, so if we need them to come in and look at some logs or something like that, they can get in if we have a connected device, right?
I believe so. Now, I think the grower might have to give them access to get in,
right?
But I think it's a super simple, just a toggle of a switch to allow them to get in.
And then you also have the Pass Master with the Panorama. We've always done that with FieldView, allowing two machines to connect, and whether it's yield data, planter data, whatever it may be, they're sharing coverage data in the field and meshing those together for one task. But this Pass Master inside of Panorama is going to be what's going to handle that going forward. So I'd say the most we have used it on some cotton pickers, and if we got two cotton pickers racetracking in a field and they're applying all their same yield to one map, we've done that. But we have done a fair amount of planters that are sharing their data, which makes a little more sense because looking out across the field and seeing which ones have already been done, you can see if a row's been picked cotton. I mean, and you can see if a row's been planted also, but just not as obvious, I guess. But so that kind of goes through most of that stuff. So now I was kind of waiting towards the end to talk about the OutRun stuff, just because I think the rest of our conversation about farm progress will probably be more related to autonomy in the last little bit here. So so the OutRun, we've talked about that some. They did release during farm progress the OutRun autonomous grain cart, which is what we've mainly known it for, is the grain cart. Well, they did release that. The two big things, they're opening up to the Fendt kit, so the Fendt 900s will be supported, which will be big for our area, and then also tillage. And the tillage thing was probably one of my favorite pieces, just because that gives us more options with a grower to say, yes, you can use this as a grain cart, which is it's big in our area, but not as big as maybe out west. But now you can use it for tillage also. So if you put it on this machine, you could use it multiple times a year for different operations, and it just makes sense. Not to mention, you're talking about larger horsepower tractors for our area running these things. So having it on a machine that will more than likely do some tillage is not a bad idea on that. So the Fendt 900s, that'll be great to see that on. And like we've talked about, the 8Rs are already supported, so we can do the grain cart features on the 8Rs now. So so with the OutRun, you can stage your tractor with the grain cart. You can call it from the combine, send it back to the loading station. It is not dumping automatically yet. We've been asked that a lot, but it is not dumping automatically. But it'll come to you and go back to the staging area, ready to dump, and you can use it, one man in field kind of thing, other than the dumping of it. So that's a really cool thing that we're certified to do here in our area. So other stuff, Fendt did release their new 1000 series machine. That's going to be pretty big also. I hadn't really dug into a lot of the other features as far as engine stuff and all on it, but it's going to be a big one, being the 1000 series. And I think Case released a new Steiger too, didn't they? Release another new big machine. So a few different big tractor releases there. Let's see what else. Most everything else other than, I know one that I really liked that we looked at earlier was that Residue Reaper. That was one that was really cool. So Sharp Harvest has got, this is a more mechanical thing. If you look it up, it's called the Residue Reaper. Uh, this is a unit. It's a wavy coulter that they attach to the bottom of the corn head, and it's pretty neat thought because we're all the time talking to growers about you can do more with a pass. You know, you can get through the field and do more. You got to drive this pass anyways. You might as well put out some liquid, or you might as well do this. You might as well do that. You might as well have row cleaners, and you don't have to go ahead and, well, you know, whatever it is. There's other things that you can do in one pass and be a little more efficient. So this is kind of that same vein with this Residue Reaper. And this unit is a really rugged looking unit on there. Goes on the bottom of the corn head, and to my understanding, and you may have seen differences with it, but it's going in there and kind of going ahead and start chopping up that root ball and that stalk that's left over from chopping. So it's going to be just behind the corn head, and it's going to be going through and trying to go ahead and break some of that up, and possibly, you know, it's going to break it up better into the soil, but then it's also may even save some tires a little bit too, just softening that up before the actual tires even get to it. So that was a really cool, like a simpler idea, but really cool feature, kind of like the DuraWear thing is just kind of right there, you know, just a great idea, you know, just, you can definitely tell farmers came up with it. I mean, who else would decide to make something like that? So that was a really cool thing. Um, Fendt did release their stack fold optimum planter. Also, we haven't really gotten a big look at that, but they have released that. So that's something we may, you know, see in our area some, and I'm sure it's going to be, you know, totally outfitted with precision stuff there. On the autonomy side, did you say you saw some stuff specific on drones, or just saying there was a lot of drone stuff? Was there something that you saw?
There was a few specific ones that I saw, but mainly just the fact that there's a lot of technology and time and resources continuously being put into the spray drones. Kind of go back, you know, this year, you know, with our potatoes, you know, we make a lot of fungicide passes over the potatoes, and you know, with me working here, um, you know, this year it worked really good for us to use, you know, to hire out somebody to come and spray our potatoes with the drones. And this was our first experience with having them on our farm, and they just worked great. But the one thing that kind of that we had to have a little bit of a learning process with was, you know, when we first started spraying, you know, kind of the limiting factor with the spray drones is capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So we started out, we were putting out 3 gallons to the acre, um, which we felt like was good, but we started having some disease problems and bumped that up to 5. I really think we need to be at 5 gallons to the acre putting out, which meant for each tank, they could put out about 1.5 acres before they had to come back and fill up. You know, so that was kind of the limiting factor, is that the capacity of the tanks, specifically for what we're doing. And so I just see that the drones now, I saw there was one up that had up to an 80-gallon tank now, you know, so just they're continuously getting larger and larger, and I feel like probably more, you know, I think they're going to be able to be used more and more as that technology continues to grow, the tank size continues to grow, and, you know, and even for us, and, you know, it's compared to our, you know, we've had it crop dusted before, you know, we just felt like we had a little bit of better, especially on the ends, you know, those drones aren't having to come up and go over the power lines and go over trees. We felt like we just had those drones really cut the ends in a lot better for us. And even with the propellers, you know, just kind of blowing that fungicide down into the canopy. So I think I think drone spraying really is something. There's something to it. And I don't know. I just see that technology continue to grow, and saw a lot of different companies putting stuff out this week.
Yeah, I see something talking about um, heavy lift drone or something. So it kind of, yeah, I'm sure that's for other features, but it does make you see that they're working on capacity stuff, even if that's for a different application, but taking some of that other technology and using it. Because I know I haven't seen a lot of it, but I've heard people talking about, you know, some of these drones you can actually put a dry box on and do
Yep.
some granular stuff, and that's really going to require some lift on that. I mean, because I mean, it can obviously carry some granular, but how much? And you don't have to fill it up like every 2 minutes or something. So
Exactly. We got to make it practical. Yeah.
right, yeah. So I'm sure there's tons of drone stuff out there. One cool thing, this isn't really new, but it's just, I guess they were talking about it more, was the 360 yield rain. That's a pretty cool system there too, and it's technically in the autonomy world. Y'all can pull that up and look at it. But that 360 yield rain is really like a rain reel, autonomous rain reel with booms with Y drops for irrigation. It's really,
that is a great explanation, actually.
Kind of what it is. Yeah. So it's a rain reel, but with actual booms sticking out. With if you know what Y drops are, they're applying the water down at the base of the plant. So it's got more of a bigger looking PVC at the bottom is what it looks like, and they're just Ying out at the bottom and flooding down at the base instead of spraying over top. So I'm sure there's a bunch of different features that they have on those for applying nutrients and different things that you can do too, since you are applying down low. I don't know if I saw any. Did they have options? Surely they have some where they have heads up top where they can cast over top too, I would think. But I guess they're just trying to be more efficient and apply down in the row, I guess.
Yeah, that's mainly what I saw was them applying right there at the roots.
Yeah. So that's a really cool one. There's tons of different AI stuff now. I know they're trying to incorporate all this stuff, and I know there's some things that are AI, whether we realize they are or not, but all these different cameras and things that are learning, and you kind of wonder where all this data is going. Like you got this company learning all this stuff, you got this company learning all this stuff, and all that data is theirs because they've collected it, I assume. But like you think about how great could everybody's systems be if they had a little bit of everybody's data. But I know that's not, they're obviously paying a lot of money to get that too. But it's just crazy seeing all these different groups out there, like the laser weeder. I think we briefly touched on that about the PTI farm, but they were talking about that earlier when we were watching one of the recaps from the Farm Progress show, and they were talking about the laser weeder, which they had up at PTI, and that unit's using facial recognition and all this different stuff to see weeds and hit them with a laser. So surely that's going to be something that's going to be in organics and all that different kind of stuff, or just any of these areas too. I mean, you got all these areas that are real particular about what you can and can't put out, whether it's organic or not. Like you're just not allowed to spray in some areas or spray certain things. And then the restrictions on food products and all that's gotten so big. So I'm sure that's going to be something that'll be used in those areas. But I think a lot of it, the laser stuff, that's cool and all. And I understand, why they would go that route, but just being able to address a weed individually when you're at that point in the season is pretty nice, and not having to just broadcast so much. I mean, that's going to save you so much time, money, whatever it may be, and be better hopefully for the land and all that also, and maybe not kill somebody's roses on the finish line or something other. So but I'd say the biggest topics of farm progress that we saw this year was probably related more to the autonomy and those kind of things, whether it's autonomous flying objects or ground driving rigs, or just AI centric units that are just pulling in data and doing cool things with that data. There's just a lot of information coming in and out of the field, and probably a great reason why we're going to have Starlinks on tractors coming up too. So we're all the tractors in the field have become a data center. Now I guess they're just going to be pulling all this information and shooting back up to the web. So we'll have more information, like you were saying earlier. We'll have more information than we know what to do with. So having softwares like Panorama and FarmEngage and ones like that are bringing all the stuff together, hopefully that data doesn't just sit on a shelf somewhere, and we can actually do something with it, and growers can make decisions off of it, and hopefully figure out the next thing. It's like you were talking about looking at the delta force, comparing that with the yield. It goes back to Jason talking about his compaction studies last week. That kind of stuff. It's no different. It's really just real life trials, really, that you're tracking in the field with your own data. So if you're, like we were saying earlier, if you can make every pass count, you can log more data through each pass, or you can do some other application through each pass. I mean, that's a great thing to make you more efficient all day long. So I guess that's most everything I know of. Is there anything else that stood out to you, or anything else you had this week?
No, I think we covered a lot of what we wanted to talk about. Like you were saying, I think the key word was autonomy this past week, and whether it makes you a little uncomfortable or whether you believe that we're ready for autonomy in agriculture, it's here. And I think that there are definitely a lot of advancements in the autonomy space. I think there are definitely starting to become more and more applications where maybe it is feasible or it is reasonable. Autonomy is there to make us more efficient. So, and I think that as the technology continues to grow, that there are more and more applications that even we see. Like, I believe like the tillage things, I think that's going to be huge for us. The autonomous tillage just makes sense. It makes sense for a lot more operations. I know we already, as a company, Ag Technologies, we deal with Sabanto already. And, I think that there's a lot of good applications for that. I know right now we're mainly on sod farms. A lot of sod farms is where that application is right now. But I think as autonomy just continues to grow, I think it just becomes, more reasonable in a lot of different applications.
Mm-hmm. And just, getting comfortable with it, probably the key. People actually wanting to incorporate it, because like you talking about the drone spraying 2-3 years ago, you had people saying, I never do that. And then now all those people have either probably had somebody come out and spray something for them, or they have one that they own themselves. So it's changing. It's changing a lot. So, well, I think that's probably the majority of what we had today. Kind of exciting to say that we're on all platforms now, it seems. So we've got everything out there on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and everywhere that you listen to your podcast. So we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we're gonna try to keep as many updates coming as we can. And I guess Brian, unless you got something else you want to add.
Nope, just appreciate you listening, and we'll try to keep you updated as we go through the season.
Okay, guys. Well, this is Ag Technologies Podcast. We appreciate y'all, and we will talk with y'all next time.